Rob Thompson, Charger Nation Network. We got Mike Ambrose here. Mike, how you doing?
Great. Hi, Rob.
Thanks for joining. So, Mike, we want to talk a little bit to you about just your experience at New Haven. Obviously, you have you and your wife have an endowment for a scholar athlete, which we'll bring on in a second. What does that mean to you and your family?
It means a lot, and especially when you look at everything the university has done for us, literally going back almost 40 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. But if you think about it, is that the university was there when I needed it the most in my life. And it's been very easy to give back over these 4 decades. And any chance that we have to go and help a student is just, another way to give back.
So talk about that then, Mike. When you were coming out of high school, why UNH?
It's a very interesting story. Actually, if you go back to when I was in high school, I was a pretty good runner. I was an average student, but I was going to be the first male in my family to actually graduate from high school. I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I really didn't have any ambitions of going to college. I was going to be a runner. And it was during my senior year when a guidance counselor said, "Hey, you're getting all these track scholarships for college. What do you think?" And I said, "I'm going to be a runner." And he just kind of looked at me and he said, "Well, you're never going to make any money from that. What else are you good at?" And I said, "Well, I like to draw." He said, "You're not going to make money from that either." He says, "What else you got?" He says, "Well, I'm pretty good in math." And at that time, that meant I pretty much just showed up for class. But I said, "Okay, you're good at math and you like to draw. You're going to be an engineer." I said, "Well, can I still run?" And he said, "Of course you can." Now, little did I know what that meant. I didn't even know what an engineer was back then, ironically. And so, as I got to more into it throughout my senior year, I realized that it was something that if I was going to take it seriously and, being the type A personality I was even back then, once I realized what would be required to be a college student, incredibly, because this probably never would have happened today. I was state champion in the mile. I decided not to pursue a track scholarship, but I did decide that I was going to major in engineering and everything that meant. So I didn't even start school at the University of New Haven. I started at another school because I didn't want to have the temptation of having to run. I did still run on my own, but after about a year and a half, couple things. I really just devoted myself to engineering and learning about calculus and everything that's required to be a good engineer. But I still ran on my own. And then after about a year and a half, I ran out of money. And I'll never forget. I was running a park one day. It was after work because I was working, trying to get whatever I can to support myself. And I went down on my knees and I said a prayer. And I said, "Lord, I don't know what direction you have for me in life, but boy, I could really use some guidance now." And no kidding, 3 days later, I get a call from the track coach at the University of New Haven, and said, "Hey, I heard from your high school coach that you're still working out. You're still in pretty good shape. I'd like to give you a tryout." And so I did that. And it was about a couple weeks after that, so I had a couple more weeks to train. I did very well. In fact, I was at the top of of all the runners that were there. Even though I hadn't really competed for a year and a half. And so they gave me a scholarship. Actually, it was a combination of athletic and academic scholarship. And from there, New Haven just did an incredible job of giving me a support network. My professors were very accommodating in terms of understanding that I was a very competitive athlete. From there, I felt like it was important to give back every chance I've had. And so I did graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering. I've had a great career at Sikorsky over these 35 years since then. But it all started with the University of New Haven, and that's why it makes it so easy to give back.
What was it that drove you in your career that you saw really was the fuel for your fire from UNH on?
I've always had a desire to succeed, to prove myself. And I do think that's from my upbringing. It is from my upbringing. It wasn't the easiest of situations, but there were people who cared a lot about me, and I wanted to prove myself that I can do it. Whether it be academically, career-wise, athletically. I tell people I would never say that I'm the smartest person in the room. I know I wasn't the most gifted runner, but I know I worked the hardest, and I know that every day, I did something to try to improve myself, and that still exists today. That's something that you just never lose. You continue to have that throughout your whole life.
What are the things that you remember the most about UNH? I mean, we all have our memories of kind of walking up the North Campus early in the morning, looking at downtown, or kind of coming over the hall by Bartell's in the morning, going to breakfast or whatever. What's your memories that really baked in your mind?
Well, it's funny you talk about like looking over downtown, because my apartment was at the top of Orange Terrace, which is over by the school, so big hill. Yeah. And when I would get out of my apartment in the morning, I'd look and you could see Yale, and I always felt like, I'm just as good as anyone from Yale. And I remember saying that to myself, because athletically, actually, they had a very good track team. We used to actually practice with them, so they allowed us to use their facilities. So I got to compete against Division I athletes on a regular basis. And I just remember saying, I'm as good and better than anyone from that university. And it is funny because I still think of that today, when you look at the Burgundy, Innovation Center, and it has a great view of downtown New Haven. And I even pointed out to Steve, I says, yeah, we're sitting higher than Yale.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And, I think obviously it's my professors played a big role in my success. So I said, I competed at a national level. So because when you run track and cross country, you're competing the whole school. There's no break. And so as a result, my professors really worked with me to make sure that I was able to go and handle my academic load and also everything required. Because at the time I truly was competing at that national level against Division I and all divisions. And it just looking back on it, I don't know how I did it. I think it was just very, very determined with a great support network from the university.
Let's talk about Sikorsky and Lockheed Martin a little bit in your career there, because that in and of itself is a whole probably 2-hour podcast. But let's talk about pedigree, because I'm sure there's a lot of engineers that come through that you've met that were MIT, that went to higher, I would say, where they put categories and how they put kind of engineering schools in different categories. What was that stigma that you had to overcome, and how did you do it?
Well, you asked really good questions. So we did not prep for this, for whoever's watching this. Okay. It was a big part of, again, I think my development, and you use the phrase like chip on my shoulder. I wouldn't put it in quite like that, but absolutely trying to prove myself, because you're right, is that when you look across, especially very technically, requirements that are needed for the products that we do. Most of the top engineers come from places like the University of Maryland, Georgia Tech, Cornell, MIT. And so here I was, just a kid from the University of New Haven. I started out actually what would be considered one of the least technically competent skill sets as a designer. And usually that's where they're usually creative. Because that's where the whole drawing aspect of what I did was important. Because back then, that was actually before computers. Computers had just started when I started school, to date myself here. And so as a result, I did have to prove myself. And I tell people that, there's a reason for everything that we do. And in that time, I spent a lot of time on the factory floor, working with the hourly workers and trying to solve problems. Trying to, not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a people standpoint, that a lot of other engineers never had the chance in their careers. They just went right to the high theoretical complex problems and never had a chance to figure out conflict resolution, how to deal with deadlines. That was usually reserved for the engineers who came from the smaller schools or the trade schools. And so as a result, I ended up with a wonderful foundation. Probably the first 5 years of my career were like that. And so as a result, it teaches me about leadership skills. It teaches me about how to, work with others, how to think on my feet. And as my career advanced, I tell people building that foundation is so essential because you never know what you're going to pull from, your experiences as you progress in your career. As it turned out, I was actually in my mid 30s. So if you think of my career, it was going okay. I was getting more responsibility as a designer, but if you had asked me, one day I would be responsible for all of engineering at Sikorsky, even when I was in I would say my early 30s, I'd say there's probably about 3,000 engineers ahead of me in that race. And it just was one of those things where I had a boss who was probably one of the gruffest, toughest guys, went to trade school, he was getting ready to retire, pulled me aside one day and said, Ambrose, because he never called anyone by his first name. He said, you don't know how good you can be. He said, I've seen 1,000 engineers in my career, and he says, you have potential you don't even know about. He said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to help kick you out of design. I'm going to help get you in MIT, and let's see where you go from there. And he did. So I got into a program that was reserved for the best of the best. And I ended up going to MIT for 2 years. United Technologies was our parent company at the time. And so there I was with the smartest, the best of the emerging and high potential, engineers from across United Technologies. It wasn't just even Sikorsky. And, I probably was absolutely over my head. But in the true University of New Haven spirit, I had a lot to prove. And, I worked harder than everybody else. I know. And by the time I got that degree, I was recognized as one of the top students in the class. And in fact, my advisor, who helped me with my thesis, came down to Sikorsky, and when I briefed it to one of our societies, he was there right by my side and told the vice president at the time, said, someday this guy's going to have your job. The vice president at the time really didn't know me. We're good friends now. This was about 20 years ago. And just looked at us and says, well, who is this guy? And that degree really was the inflection point in my career, because like you said, is that University of New Haven gave me the foundation. It taught me how to be an engineer. It taught me how to be a leader. It taught me how to be a team player. But once I got that degree from MIT, I did have the credentials to go and match up with any other engineer at Sikorsky. And, and as a result, that's when my career really started to skyrocket. And, literally, that was about 1998. Literally within 8 years, I was a vice president. So I went from being just a regular kind of designer, engineer, to a vice president in 8 years. And I've been a vice president for 12 years now, in various jobs. Very diverse. I've run our largest factory. I've run our international business. I've had different jobs in engineering. So to the point where 3 years ago now, I've been in charge of all of engineering at Sikorsky.
Do you find that you have a soft place in your heart for those scrappy engineers that come in that maybe don't have the pedigree, that you see a little bit of yourself in them?
Absolutely. And this is where the athlete comes in, is that, as you know, any athlete can see that hunger, can see that look. And, it's a combination of, hunger, I'm going to be there. I'm going to persevere. Plus you also see they've been in tough situations and they've been able to, pick up their bootstraps and really continue to find ways to excel. I also find that, usually it's those kind of engineers who have that common sense, perspective that is absolutely required in the business world. So, yeah.
Well, let's bring in a little scrappy engineer up and coming. Matty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How about you guys?
Hey, Matt.
So, Matt, I asked Mr. Ambrose this question. I'm going to ask it to you as well. What is that memory that you have, that one thing that you have that you think about when you go at UNH? Is it?
I think more than a memory, it's the people. It's being at practice every day with the team and bringing everyone up and just making a good time out of a bad situation here at practice, and you're dead after those 4 300s and you don't want to run anymore. But just being able to pick up everyone else and just saying, hey, let's go. It's the last one, and finishing it and just having a good time. It's the people.
Talk about your overall experience and what this support and this scholarship means to you.
It means a lot. It's almost validating in a way. Where Mike was an engineer, I'm an engineer. It's hard work. It's a lot to do, especially with doing a sport on top of it. Like he said before, track is year round. We get in. I think I don't run cross country, so I get the first month off maybe. But we're running all year, and it's tough. It's long, but it's worth it, especially when getting this scholarship. It means a lot. It means that what I'm doing is I'm in the right direction. So I'm leading the team. I'm doing well where I need to, and it feels good to be able to say that I'm leading the team and I'm being an engineer and I'm succeeding in all these different aspects of my life.
Talk about your internship that you're going through right now in Albany, and how is that helping you with your discovery or where you want to go with your career?
Yeah. So, excuse me. I interned last year with the same company at Albany Molecular Research Incorporated up in Albany, and it helped me a lot. It was they're a consulting company, so we got to work on a whole bunch of different projects. So I had my one direct supervisor, but they were working on 5 or 6 different projects that I was able to peek into and learn just a whole bunch of different things about everything. And it's more of like a benchtop scale. So you get a little bit of the really small stuff, you get some of the medium scale stuff, and a little bit of the big stuff. So it helped me see a whole bunch of different sides of the chemical, profession. And it was sort of an R&D type feel, and I really like that. I like being able to have a problem, being like, okay, what do I know? How can we try and solve this? What's the best way? And just devising these different experiments to figure out what the best conditions are, or whatever we need to figure out. It was really good. It was mentally challenging, and it was fun.
Well, from Clifton Park, New York, Shendahoa High School. The Plainsman, right? Is it the Plainsman?
Yep, Plainsman.
The Plainsman. Why New Haven? Why University of New Haven? What was that decision to go 3 hours away?
Well, I like to say it's far enough to be away from my family, but close enough to get back if I ever need to. But it was just the feel when I got there. My mom always said she saw me when I was there, and she said it just felt like you were at home. It was. Like I said, it's just the feel of it. I got onto the campus and I was just like, wow, I can really see myself being here. I applied to a whole bunch of different engineering schools, RPI, RIT, all the things, different things like that. But UNH it felt right. It had a good track program that I was able to run at. It had a really great support structure, which Mike had mentioned before. And it was the people. Everyone seemed really nice and supportive. And I like that type of environment where everyone can try and bring each other up rather than compete against each other and tear each other down. It's building each other up and that teamwork and that camaraderie that really helps everything grow and flourish.
Man, talk a little bit about what's that memory you have on some of your on some of the meets. Where are some of the meets that you remember? Just from a competition standpoint, going against Division I teams.
I think my most memorable meet was it was my freshman year. We were at the Boston University, and my coach had put me in the 200. We'd done a lot of training, and it was the first time I went sub 23, and I ran 22.1. So it was a huge drop of my time. It was surprising. It was my freshman year. It was our first big competitive meet. And I did so well. It was really exciting. I remember getting off the track and just looking, and all my teammates just jumping up and down, and they were happy for me because it was a great time. It was just such an exciting moment and for me, and it was able to qualify me for conference and for indoor, and it was a great feeling. It was wonderful. I loved it. Even competing against the Division I guys, it gives you that drive, that competition. Like you want to prove you're better than them. You want to be able to show you can run with them. But it was a great feeling, especially just coming off the track and seeing everyone like all hyped up when my time popped up. It was a great time.
That is a good time.
Mike, do you have any advice? I mean, just through Matt's experience now of being a student athlete and discovering his path as as engineering as a career, what advice would you give to him?
You're doing the right thing by getting the internship. I do tell students today is that today it's so competitive. For my generation, for Rob's generation, it was actually easier. There was just a lot more jobs, a lot more opportunities. So you have to differentiate and distinguish yourself from everybody else. And the first thing, obviously, you got to get the good grades because that's the price of entry. The second is you have to have real good internships. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing it, because if you weren't, I noticed, I didn't realize that you're graduating next year. Says you better be making sure you're doing something this summer, because you're going to leverage that. And then the other thing I would say is that in terms of distinguishing yourself, is that if there's any, technical societies or anything you can do from a networking standpoint, including myself, that's one of the great things about the scholarship is that the past recipients of Diana and my scholarship, we've leveraged that in the senior year, one to, have more of a, personal type of advice in terms of opportunities that you may have. For both of the previous winners, I continue to be in contact with them today. The first one graduated, I think it's 4 years ago now. Interestingly, they both are working at Lockheed. That wasn't how it started out, but they both ended up there. There's ways that through these endowed scholarships that you have access to usually pretty successful people who have big networks. So it shouldn't just be one person. You should be looking at other ways that you can be building your network. And that's another great thing about the University of Haven is that there's plenty of successful alumni who are going to look for ways to go and help students really look for that help. I totally forgot about the really great thing about being at the University of Haven for me was the track and the hard workouts. So I think Matt must have just blocked those out because they were hard. But in retrospect, it is one of those special memories on how you just push your body beyond anything that you possibly think could happen. And it's really because you're doing it together. You're doing it with your teammates. And I would say, I think that has become such a part of my personality and leadership style that I don't even recognize that its origin actually started in those workouts and those races. It sounds like that's going to be part of your makeup also going forward. So never lose that.
I just want to say thank you to you guys, Rob for connecting me and Mike, and Mike for all those helpful words. I'll definitely keep them in mind. Building the network definitely seems like something that I should do, and try and just expand everything. And I'll definitely be in contact with you. We've had a handful of conversations before, and I'm sure we'll keep talking after this. It was a good conversation to have with you guys, and I'm really happy you guys brought me on.
Thank you again. On behalf of the Charger Nation Network, I'm Rob Thompson, and we'll see you guys soon.